My own parents dragged me into a courtroom to evict me, just so my entitled younger sister could steal the home I built with my bare hands. But they forgot one tiny detail. I kept the receipts. Have you ever realized that the people you bleed for are the ones holding the knife? I'm Heidi. I'm 35, an architect, and a single mom to an amazing 7-year-old named Nora. For my entire life, I was the designated fixer in my family. I was the one who patched the leaks, painted the walls, and held everything together, while everyone else took the credit. I used to think that being useful meant being loved. So 2 years ago, when my daughter Nora had a tough stint in the hospital and we needed a fresh start, I made a deal with my parents. I asked if I could move into the rundown, collapsing carriage house in their backyard. It wasn't a favor. I didn't ask for a handout. I paid for the lumber out of my own pocket. I pulled the city permits. I hired the contractors, rewired the electricity, and spent my weekends covered in sawdust and paint to transform that rotting shack into a beautiful modern home for me and my little girl. My dad called it temporary. My mom just smiled that tight, polite smile she uses when she's already made a decision behind your back. I didn't realize it then, but I wasn't building a home for my daughter and me. In their eyes, I was just doing the free manual labor to build a starter home for my younger sister, Ava. Ava is 30. She's the golden child, the kind of person who wears white to a messy dinner and somehow never gets a stain on her. The cracks in my family's facade finally shattered during a typical Sunday dinner. The roast chicken was on the table, the wine was poured, and the atmosphere felt rehearsed. Ava swirled her glass, looked out the window at the carriage house I had poured my soul into, and casually said, "You know, it's kind of perfect back there, like a really cute starter home." "For who?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "For me," she replied, not even blinking. "I'm 30 now. It's time I own something." I looked across the table. No one met my eyes. Not my mother, who was suddenly very interested in her napkin. Not my father, who was staring blankly at the wall. The only person who spoke was my 7-year-old daughter, Nora, who whispered, "Mommy, can I have your drumstick?" "Take both, sweetie," I told her, my voice eerily calm. Suddenly, I had lost my appetite. The ambush became official the following week. My mother asked me to meet her for coffee. I arrived straight from a job site, dust still on my boots. She slid a crisp manila folder across the table. Clean fonts, cold intentions. It was a formal, legal agreement. "Ava's been saving up," my mother said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We think it's time to make things official. You have 90 days to vacate the carriage house." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because the sheer audacity of it left me breathless. They were legally evicting me to hand over the house I paid for to the daughter who had never lifted a hammer in her life. When people try to rewrite history, you don't argue with them. You let paper do the talking. For weeks, I didn't fight, I didn't scream, I didn't post angry rants on social media. Women who raise their voices get labeled as hysterical. Women who stay completely silent and gather evidence, they get results. I documented everything. Every bank transfer note marked carriage house utilities. Every email where I sent my parents the receipts for the lumber. Every text message from my mom saying, "Thanks again for paying the property taxes this quarter." I even had the before and after photos of the egress windows I installed myself. I printed hundreds of pages, hole-punched them, and slid them into color-coded binders. My daughter Nora saw me working late one night and called it Mommy's homework. Meanwhile, my sister Ava started stopping by uninvited. She'd stand in my doorway, looking at the walls, musing about how she would paint over my hard work. "Maybe a warmer color here," she'd say, running her manicured hand along the exposed brick I had restored. She was waiting for me to break. She wanted me to explode so she could play the victim. But calm isn't weakness. Calm is armor that doesn't make a sound. The house itself seemed to know what was happening. At night, after Nora fell asleep, I'd listen to the wood breathing, the pipes ticking. I looked at the walls I had built to keep my daughter safe. I whispered to the empty room, "We're gonna need to stand strong." And I promised myself right then, I was done being easy to move. Courtrooms in real life aren't like they are on TV. They are small, they are quiet. It's the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. When I walked in, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer restraint it took to not lose my mind. Ava sat right beside my parents. Her shoulders were touching my mom's. She wore a pristine white blazer, looking like absolute innocence. Their lawyer stood up. Smooth voice, expensive suit. He painted a picture of a generous family dealing with a stubborn squatter. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "this property was always permissive use. My client, Ava, simply seeks her first opportunity for home ownership. Her sister is refusing to leave family property." When it was my turn, I stood up. My voice surprised even me. It was steady, low, and anchored. "I am not a squatter," I said, looking directly at the judge. "I am their daughter, and I built that structure at my own expense." I placed my heavy binder on the desk. The sound of that thick stack of paper hitting the wood echoed in the small room. Thwack. Truth always makes a sound. The judge nodded and began flipping through. We walked through the photos, the Venmo notes, the contractor's invoices, even the message from my mom thanking me for covering the taxes. Ava stood up, trying to save her narrative. "I'm not the bad guy here," she cried out, her voice trembling perfectly. "I've been saving. I deserve a safe home." "You do," I said softly, looking her dead in the eye. "It just doesn't have to be mine." My dad muttered something about me being ungrateful. The judge immediately raised her hand. Enough. But then a movement from behind me. It was Nora. My 7-year-old daughter tugged on my sleeve. "Mom?" Her voice was small but certain. "Can I show the judge something you don't know?" The entire room froze. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. The judge studied my little girl, her expression softening, and nodded. "You may." Nora reached into her little backpack and pulled out her tablet. "It's from our living room security camera," she explained. "I saved it." She pressed play. The screen lit up. The timestamp showed daylight from a few days prior while I was at work. On the video, the door to my carriage house opened. My mother and Ava walked right in. Ava walked straight to the carbon monoxide detector on the wall. With practiced quick fingers, she popped the cover off and pulled the battery out. On the video, my mom warned, "Don't touch that." But it wasn't a warning. It was a stage whisper. Ava just laughed on the recording. "If the city inspection fails tomorrow, she'll have to move out. It's faster this way." Then, on the video, my mother picked up my architectural drawings from my desk and said, "We'll just say we thought they were old trash." The clip ended. The silence in that courtroom was thick, heavy, and completely suffocating. The judge slowly turned her gaze from the tablet to my parents. My mother's mouth opened, then closed again. We didn't mean, this is what we are not going to do. We are not going to pretend this is family empowerment when it's blatant manipulation and endangerment caught on video." She grabbed her pen, ink, clean, and final. "Motion denied. Petition dismissed with prejudice." "And," the judge added, looking at my parents, "I am entering an injunction against the plaintiffs." Then the judge looked at me. Her eyes were soft. "Get your locks changed today." They came to court asking for fairness. The truth demanded consequences. The morning after court, I changed the locks. New deadbolts, new keys. The sound of the lock clicking felt like punctuation. The end of one sentence, the start of another. I even hired a professional electrician to come fix the detector. When he asked what happened, I just smiled and said, "Family project gone wrong." He nodded like he'd heard that a million times before. By noon, the carriage house felt entirely different. It didn't feel bigger or fancier, it just felt like mine. That evening, my phone lit up nonstop. Missed calls from Mom, texts from Dad, a voicemail from Ava. Guilt always needs multiple channels to reach you. I let it ring. Instead of arguing, I wrote them a letter. 1 page. No anger, no drama. I put it in an envelope and dropped it in their mailbox. It simply said, "I love you. That hasn't changed. What has changed is your access to me. You don't get keys anymore. You don't get to decide what's mine. This isn't revenge, it's closure." 3 days later, my dad showed up on the sidewalk outside my fence. He crossed his arms, leaning over the boundary he still didn't believe in. "You embarrassed us," he said.
"In a room you chose to drag me into," I replied calmly. "We were just trying to help your sister," he pleaded. "I know, you always are, but stop asking me to be the mattress she falls on." He flinched, maybe because he finally realized it was the truth. Weeks passed and the quiet stopped feeling heavy. It started feeling honest. Ava eventually bought her own place, a tiny condo. She posted a picture of her new keys on Instagram with the caption, "Homeowner vibes, a girl who can do both." I didn't comment. I didn't need to correct the record. Peace doesn't need an audience, and freedom isn't loud. Nora and I built things instead. We built a loft bed with drawers, we built a cedar bird feeder, and Nora painted a wooden sign for our front door. It just says, "Home," and right underneath it, in her little 7-year-old handwriting, she added, "No secret visits." Every time I put my new key in that lock, it sounds like closure. Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're seatbelts, and mine finally fit perfectly. If you've ever had to choose your own peace over your family's approval, I want you to know something. You are not alone. And closure isn't a slammed door. It's the quiet, steady click of a lock that means you are finally safe.